In the last program, we discussed the beginnings of Babylonian civilization and the two powerful dynasties of Isin and Larsa. However, these were not the only two players in the land that we call Babylonia. There were several other little petty kingdoms, most of which we don't know very much about. However, one of these small kingdoms is very famous, that of the Kingdom of Babylon. How did it rise to become the dominant power in southern Mesopotamia and essentially have the region, Babylonia, named after it? The answer to that will be our focus here. In the year 1894 BCE, a relatively unknown Amorite chieftain named Sumu-Abum established a small kingdom along what was then the eastern banks of the Euphrates River. There was nothing really special about this area other than the fact that it possessed good farmland and maybe had one small city called Babylu, which today we call Babylon. In fact, his small kingdom, if you could call it that, was eclipsed by that of another just a short distance to the east, Kish. Kish was one of the most important cities in the history of ancient Mesopotamia. It was featured in the Sumerian king list as the home of many great rulers who were so powerful and respected that they had the authority to arbitrate conflicts amongst other city-states, such as the great land dispute between Lagash and Umma. Kish was also the place where Sargon the Great first got his start as the cupbearer to the king Ur-Zubaba. And before the title King of Sumer and Akkad was adopted during the days of the Neo-Sumerian Empire, the title King of Kish was the most prestigious of its day. On the other hand, Babylon's only real significance was as an administrative center during the Neo-Sumerian and Akkadian periods. There's also reference to it as a place where the Akkadian king, Shar-Kali-Shari, built a temple. Other than that though, there's not much early information on the city, and as of today, archaeologists have not been able to excavate its earliest levels of habitation. How Sumu-Abum acquired Babylon is unknown. For all we know, after the breakdown of the Neo-Sumerian Empire and the arrival of Amorite tribes in the region, the city may have been mostly abandoned. All that we know is that it was here that Sumu-Abum founded his kingdom and started a new dynasty which we conveniently call the First Dynasty of Babylon. Sumu-Abum seemed to have really liked Babylon because he's recorded to have spent a great deal of effort in building up the city's fortifications, as well as constructing and dedicating new temples. Like other Amorite tribes and their rulers, Sumu-Abum was constantly involved in turf wars with other states in the region. This was just the way of life in those times. A town or city could change rulers several times within a generation. At the time though, Sumu-Abum was a relatively minor player. He was in no position to successfully go to war with anyone. Thus, he made alliances with other, probably equally sized kingdoms, for the purpose of keeping his greatest threat, the ruler of Kish, at bay. His diplomacy seems to have worked, because his successors, starting with his son, Sumu-Lael, and continuing with his descendants, Sabium and Apilsin, were able to greatly increase their land holdings, while at the same time have the resources to build small fortresses and fortified towns around the capital of Babylon. It seems that this gave the dynasty's fourth king, Apilsin, enough confidence to venture as far north as the town of Karshamash, though it's not known for certain how long he was able to lay claim to the area. The early Babylonian kings' attention, though, was not just on military matters, but also on making their lands as productive as possible. They dug canals and built levees, and of course, supplied the funds needed to build temples across their realm. Such was life for the first 4 kings of Babylon. Southeast of Babylon was the mighty kingdom of Larsa. For several decades, the kings of Larsa had been gaining ground and absorbing other, smaller kingdoms into their realm. By the time of their king, Warad-Sin, in 1834 BCE, they had become the most powerful as well as the wealthiest kingdom in southern Mesopotamia. This was partially due to the fact that they controlled the lucrative trade routes from the Gulf region as well as those of the Elamite lands to the east. In 1822 BCE, Uruk was succeeded by his brother, Rim-Sin, who started a major campaign to expand Larsa's borders even further, especially towards the north and the west. In 1812 BCE, Babylon's fifth king, Sumuabum, came to power. We actually know a decent bit about him because we have a lot more written sources, such as inscriptions and correspondence with other kings, than we do for his four predecessors. Some of these are correspondence with Unum, the king of Uruk. Information gathered from such letters indicates that Sumuabum and Unum were related by marriage because the daughter of Samuel, Babylon's second king, was married to a past king of Uruk. In 810 BCE, Unum was in trouble. Rim-Sin of Larsa had his eyes on Uruk. In a letter that Unum wrote to Sumuabum, he asked the king of Babylon to remember that the two share a special bond, that they're from the same royal house, and more importantly, that they have been and still are military allies. Unum, in a sense, is looking for confirmation that Sumuabum will back him should he be forced to go to war with Larsa. In 1810 BCE, the second year of Sumuabum's reign, he joined both Unum of Uruk and Damik-Ilishu, the king of Isin, who was Larsa's arch-enemy. They formed a coalition to take out Rim-Sin. Though we don't have details on any battles, it's obvious that Rim-Sin was the victor. Like, blatantly obvious. In fact, he named the year of his victory, his 14th on the throne, as, and I quote, "The year the armies of Uruk, Isin, Babylon, Sutium, Rapicum, and the king of Uruk were smitten with weapons." As far as we know, Uruk was conquered and completely absorbed by Larsa, while Isin lost significant territory to its arch-rival. However, the records available don't indicate any territorial losses for Babylon. Now that the city was on Rim-Sin's hit list, Sumuabum spent the next 10 to 15 years building fortresses along his border in preparation for any future attack. Eventually, a battle did come, though we have no indication of how many troops were amassed on either side. We just have a statement dated to 1801 BCE, where Sumuabum records a victory over Larsa. Again, the details of this victory aren't known, and there don't seem to be any documents from Larsa's side to either confirm or deny this. In 1793 BCE, Larsa defeated and annexed its long-term rival, Isin. It now held southern Mesopotamia and all of the great cities of Sumer. With the Persian Gulf to the south, Elam to the east, and really worthless desert to the west, the only way for Larsa to expand was north, smack into the middle of Babylonian territory. There was no way around it. The two would eventually come to blows, and Babylon had to be prepared. Larsa, though, wasn't Sumuabum's only concern. To his north, in the land of Subartu, which later would become part of Assyria, another Amorite king was eating up large swaths of territory. His name was Shamsi-Adad, and his kingdom of Upper Mesopotamia was on the rise. To the east was another expansionist kingdom, that of Ishnuna. Further east, there were also the Elamites, who never lost an opportunity to raid in Mesopotamia. And these are just the potential foes that we know about. Others may have also existed. Sumuabum, though, never faced any of these adversaries. That's because he died in 1793 BCE, the same year that Larsa annexed Isin. He was succeeded by his son, Hammurabi. Yes, that Hammurabi. We'll talk about him in the next video about Old Babylonia. Once again, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I really hope you learned something. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time.